This is an interview with Al Kennedy, author of Big Chief Harrison and the Mardi Gras Indians. There are many Mardi Gras Indian tribes and chiefs in New Orleans. Why did you decide to write about Big Chief Donald Harrison and the Guardian of the Flames? What is it that makes him so unique?
Well, I was introduced to him by his family. His family called me, and they asked me if I would consider doing a series of interviews with him. I had met the family when I was doing previous work on public school music teachers, and his family was very involved in that. So that as we got to, I knew his name. I knew he was, an important person in the tradition. But I got to know him through the process of doing this book more. And so that what I found was just this remarkably strong leader. And it made me understand how so many of these Mardi Gras Indian chiefs are strong leaders, and how they continue this tradition. And it's such an important tradition, but so many times in the community, the people who come to New Orleans, they see this amazing color and this amazing spectacle, and they see the Mardi Gras Indians. But what they don't see is the whole context of their lives and what this tradition means to them. So this whole project, based upon an invitation from the family to do it, led to a series of interviews that led to more interviews. Then after he passed away, his wife said that she would continue the process. And over the course of years, I gathered the material and gradually got to know him even more.
Great. And how do you think he defined the Mardi Gras Indian tradition?
What he did was he helped to perpetuate it, so that he inherited something. He got it from the older folks. He wanted to pass it down to the younger. So what he did was he spent, when he lived his life within the tradition from the time he was about 4 years old until his dying breath in VA hospital in 1998. He lived the tradition as he defined it. And he felt it was a very, very special and important tradition of strength, of resistance, of carrying on something tremendously important, and not just carrying it on, but sharing it and passing it down. So one thing that I always noted about him that was so important was that he, of course, like all chiefs, he's going to brag a lot. But what he did, he always made sure that you knew who taught him, who were his mentors in the tradition. So he never stood out alone. He always said, this person taught me this. Brother Tillman was one of my heroes and I massed with him. Or Big Chief Fletcher was one of the people who trained me and brought me up in the tradition. Or Big Chief Robbie was someone that I learned from. So that he never stood alone. He always stood with these mentors behind him that, whether they were living or passed on.
Great. And why do you think his story needs to be told? Why it's very important that his message is spread?
Well, there are many approaches to that question, because for one thing, Katrina taught us that we can lose a lot of storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
The tradition that a lot of these individuals were scattered because of the storm, some were killed, and you realize that putting something down on paper is tremendously important. And that I hope that what I see this work as is one tiny piece of what could be a 1,000-piece puzzle. And that's why there definitely needs to be more stories about these community leaders. And I believe in order to build on the literature of New Orleans, we need to know their stories. Mm-hmm. And their stories are important because they're carrying on something. And what did it mean to them? Obviously, it meant a lot for them to invest so much time and energy and money in something year after year after year, and then to want to take the time to pass it on to the younger generation as well. Mm-hmm. So that to me is the importance of putting this story on paper. And then you learn about an incredible person. Here was a guy who was, I think, the first word that comes to mind is totally fearless. But here was a person who became an avid reader, who just read voraciously, who then that became a part of his life. He worked as a waiter, and oftentimes in the course of working as a waiter, he would go to the public library in between his shifts, between the lunch and the dinner shift, and he would read. And he would look specifically for the philosophy section. That's what was so amazing to me was when I met him. And we were talking, and he just leaned over and said, "Are you hip to Albert Camus?" Now, I had not thought about this philosopher since I was struggling with his work in college. And now all of a sudden, this Mardi Gras Indian chief is challenging me, and I had to go back and relearn a lot about this individual. And so that there again, you have this guy who believed in reading, who was knowledgeable in so many areas, who loved being a waiter. And you know that when you think again about New Orleans and how remarkable it is that somebody who's a big chief could also become and look and appear and walk as a big chief when he's working as a waiter at, in a restaurant.
Right. And how is his legacy preserved today? Can you talk a little bit more about the literacy programs that are run by his family?
Yes, his wife Hariste, working with her family, has started the Guardians Institute. And one of the things she wants to do is preserve the traditions, which means teaching young people how to sew, teaching them about the tradition, teaching them the traditional songs, teaching them how to bead, but also at the same time to realize the importance of reading. And since the big chief himself read more than 40 books a year, that they have organized book giveaways in quite a few schools where they will get people to donate books, and they will donate books about a variety of topics and give them to the children. And what's, I think, truly amazing is how they will take these, they will make it so exciting for children to receive books. They build it up in such a way that the children think they are getting the most wonderful gift in the world when they're given a book, which is the first step toward getting them to read. So that's part of his legacy, is being preserved in a lot of different ways, and his family is working through the Institute, not just to tell a dry story about a man who lived a long time ago, but about somebody who had some ideas that make a lot of sense today.
Mm-hmm. And how did music play a role in Donald's life and the tradition of the Mardi Gras Indians?
Well, Donald loved jazz when he was in the Army in the 1950s, and he fell in love with people like Miles Davis, and that he listened and he listened and he would buy records, and he became an avid jazz fan. So that whenever he had his own children, he would play jazz for them all the time. He introduced them to an incredible array of musicians. That's why that was an influence on his son, Donald Harrison Jr., who was known around the world as as an incredible jazz musician. And then you have his grandson, Christian Scott, who was also traveling the world upon music, and they would oftentimes play in the house and listen to the music, and he would talk to them about his stories about jazz. And he had most people who knew him thought of him as a jazz scholar.
And so is Jazz Fest a big event for them?
Well, it was one of the many events they would appear at, and that he always enjoyed performing there. He would make sure that in fact where he is is at rest today in the mausoleum in St. Louis Cemetery No. 3, right, that it's right adjacent to the fairgrounds where he used to play and where he played his last performance. And so that it was an important place for him to be. He always enjoyed being out among people. He enjoyed sharing that Indian tradition. He enjoyed telling one more person who wrote Shallow Water and how he came to know that important song. And so yes, he did look forward to playing that every year with his family, as well as the many other festivals they would play in Congo Square and even in Europe.